Good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started.
They're a partner. They're one of our partners. So.
I just finished doing a week of theater camp with children ages kindergarten through fifth grade, and the first thing they had to learn in theater camp was that when the director says hold, everybody immediately yells hold, and they stop where they are. I thought this is a really good technique to use in a lot of places. And she said, you know, it's important because, number one, it means you're about to get some really important instruction, but number two, it means someone's about to get hurt. So hopefully it's the former and not the latter this morning. So good morning and welcome to New Approaches to Fundraising. I'm Kathy Machariello and I'm your moderator for this morning. I am a consultant who works in the arts and culture field and was formerly program officer for performing arts at the Andrew Mellon Foundation in New York for 11 years. So that's how I find myself here. And I'm going to ask each of the panel members to just introduce themselves with a couple of sentences. And then we will jump into some brief presentations by each panel member, about 10 minutes each, and they'll talk about fundraising from their particular perspective, hopefully bringing some creative we're going to be serenaded by David Robertson. That's really great. So each one will make a brief presentation, and we'll have a little discussion, and there'll be plenty of room for questions. The one thing I would like to just remind you, and I'll remind you again at the end, is when we do get to questions, as awkward as it may seem, could you please use the microphone, which is in the center of the room, because they are recording the sessions, and that's important. And I forgot to do that in the last session. I forgot to tell people, so we'll do that. Anyway, let's start on my far right with Emma Dunch. And if you could introduce yourself, and we'll go down the line, and then we'll get started.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Emma Dunch. I'm the president of a New York City-based fundraising firm called Dunch Arts. And I'm here today in my capacity as Interim Vice President for Development for the League of American Orchestras. It's a pleasure to have you all with us today. I'm a graduate of the League's Orchestral Management Fellowship Program, and the orchestras with whom I have worked in a fundraising capacity start in Sydney, Australia with the Sydney Symphony, my hometown and my home orchestra, the San Francisco Symphony, Nashville, Fort Wayne Philharmonic, the Longwood Symphony in Boston, and the Little Orchestra Society in New York, among others. So symphony orchestras from $1 million to $50 million. And today I've been asked to focus my comments on very practical things that orchestras in groups 3 to 8 can do to raise new money at the local level. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Randy Rosenbaum. I'm Executive Director of the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts. Back in 1976, I met with Ralph Black at the American Symphony Orchestra League. And I told him that I had run my father's delicatessen while working my way through college. He said anyone who could run a delicatessen can run a symphony orchestra. And he engaged me as an intern with the American Symphony Orchestra at that point. I went on to manage orchestras for about 12 years. Some of them like delicatessens, which is why I'm no longer managing orchestras, but I've been in the state arts agency business for the past 28 years.
Hi, everybody. My name is Diane DiBasella, and I am the Senior Program Director for Fiscal Sponsorship at Fractured Atlas. Fractured Atlas is a nonprofit arts service organization, and our mission is to help artists and arts organizations with business tools for creating work. The fiscal sponsorship program is really focused on helping individual artists and arts organizations with fundraising. So I'll talk a little bit about what it is, but my role here today is really to share information with you that I've learned from our projects about their new and exciting ways of fundraising.
And hello, my name is Stephanie Pereira. I'm the director of the art program at Kickstarter. I look after all fine arts programs, whether there are projects run by artists or nonprofit organizations. My background is in nonprofit arts management, doing things like fundraising and developing public programs and running education programs. And today I'm going to talk to you about the plethora of ways that people are running classical music projects on Kickstarter.
Okay, we're going to move directly to Diane, and as we go through the morning, we will be getting more and more and more specific until Emma tells me she'll be talking about grocery stores, right? So Diane, let's go to you for about 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kathy. So I wanted to go first today because I think each of the panelists up here are going to be talking about really specific aspects of fundraising. But I wanted to talk more broadly about what's happening today within social media and how it connects to your fundraising planning. I think that there are a lot of things that we're probably aware of, but that I sort of want to reinforce and remind you that there's a lot of tactics that you should be using every day to reach out to your audience and your patrons. I mentioned fiscal sponsorship, and I just want to tell you what that is. It is a tool which enables non-tax exempt organizations to use a 501c3 status to fundraise. So what that means is either an individual artist or an arts organization that is not a 501c3 organization can use the nonprofit status of a 501c3 organization to receive tax-deductible donations or to apply for grants that only a 501c3 can apply to. So we work with about 3,000 different projects across the country that are sort of in all different stages of fundraising. Some of them are new to it, some of them are quite experienced, but they're using a lot of different tools to actually reach out to their audiences, and that's kind of the information that I want to share with you. One of the first things I want to talk about is the need to have excellent donor and customer relationship skills when you're reaching out to your clients. This is extremely important if you are trying to reach new donors or if you're trying to sort of connect with your old donors. But to think in terms of, what is the best customer service experience you have had, and how can you apply that to reaching out and connecting with your patrons? There are a handful of sort of traditional tools for doing this, but one of them is to set up a donation relationship calendar and to think really strategically about month by month about how you're going to be connecting with people through your social media and through your website. One of the first things that I want to encourage everybody to start doing on a regular basis is making sure that you're sending out one email per month to everybody that is in your database. And this email can be, different types of things, whether or not it's your individual ask, whether or not it's an invitation to your events, whether or not it is showcasing one of the individual artists that you're working with. But it should be something that you're planning out for a year in advance, month by month, and thinking about the exact date that you're going to be sending out this communication. You want to make sure that you are not repeating the communication, so you're not asking people for money twice in a row, but that you are really being strategic about the messaging that is going out. Your goal here is to engage them and foster this relationship so that they either maintain being a donor or that they share this information with other people who could potentially be donors. So that one email per month is incredibly important to really be strategic about when it's going out. Are you going to be sending it out on the first day of each month? Do you want to send it out on specific holidays? Are you trying to have a theme to it each month where, everything related to that email is going to be connected in your social media and on your website? But be really holistic in planning for the year so that you know who on your staff is going to be responsible for that and how you're actually going to be doing it. The next thing that I want to talk about is blogging. And I think that this is something that I know personally that I'm not the most comfortable of bloggers. You have to have a very unique and distinct voice, and you have to be very current in what you're talking about. But I would encourage you all to think about, if you're not already blogging, making sure that somebody on your staff is writing currently about the activities of your organization. Your blog posts should be regular, so that means maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, depends on the size and the scale of your organization and the ability of your staff to actually produce these things. But a couple ideas for blog posts on a regular basis include highlighting an outstanding donor. So if you have somebody that's done something exceptional that you really want to make sure that everybody is aware of how they can get involved, interview one of your donors, make a video about them. You can do the same thing with an individual artist that is on within your orchestra that you are trying to sort of get interest outside of the regular people that are involved. That individual artist is going to help to spread the word to everybody else, so highlighting them can be a really great way of connecting to new audiences. Think about also engaging your staff. So who on your staff is somebody that maybe hasn't really been shown to your donors? What do they do? What is their everyday activities? Also a blog post about what you're doing with your donors' money. I know this is something that sometimes people aren't comfortable with, but you want to share with your donors how their money is being spent. This is incredibly impactful in terms of making them feel connected to the type of work that you're producing and making them feel like they're a part of what you're producing. Next, I want to talk about Facebook and Twitter as the sort of standard for connecting to people through social media. If you don't already have a Facebook page, you should have one. If you don't have a Twitter account, you should have one. If you are concerned with how do you do this, how do you manage this, how do you actually engage people on it, follow others and see how they're setting their tone, what they are actually engaging people on, and mimic them. I mean, this is a common thing within nonprofits, that nonprofits have a lot of different tactics and tools for actually reaching out to people, but searching others that you admire and that you enjoy interacting with is gonna help teach you how to do it yourself. If you haven't already set up your page, set it up, and then start to think about how frequently you're gonna post and what you want that content to be. You should have a very specific tone, so make sure that it's obviously friendly and not lofty, but that you're consistent in that messaging, that you don't have 10 different staff members or 10 different people posting, and that if you do, you have one person making sure that it all sounds the same. You can ask people within your orchestra, your individual artists that are within your orchestra, to act as ambassadors for this purpose. So let's say, for example, that you have 50 individual artists that you're working with, and they all have birthdays. And they all get probably 50 to 100 people writing on their wall on their birthday saying, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday. A great thing that you can ask your artists to do is to actually post, thank you. What I would really like you to do is to give to my orchestra this year. A $5 donation is going to be the best birthday present that I could get. This is huge in terms of spreading the word about the work that you do, but it's also, it's really personal, and it really is going to help people see, like, this is what's important to this person, and this is what they should be thinking about. Think about specific holidays and birthdays of historical figures, how you can sort of tap into that and turn it around so this engages people on Facebook. I do want to say that within social media, there has not been a lot of research done about the impact of reaching out on social media to ask for donations. There's not a ton of money coming in through Facebook unless you're using something like Kickstarter. But I do want to say that what you're doing is you're engaging these people so that when you do ask them for money through another method, that they're actually going to give and they're going to remember who you are and what you've been doing. So it's not something that you want to sort of push aside and say, I don't have time for this. Also, images on Facebook are some of the most impactful things that people notice. So sharing video content or sharing images on a regular basis is going to really engage people and make them aware of what you're doing and who you are. I have two more just sort of points about what you need to think about for the coming year. One of them is the navigation of your own website. So usability on your own website is key to making sure that people know what they should be doing when they land on your homepage. This is so important. They need to have a call to action. When they get to that homepage, do you want them to buy a ticket to a show? Do you want them to donate? Do you want them to volunteer? Do you want them to go to your blog? Make sure that your homepage is telling them to go do something. Make sure that your About Us page has really clear information about your mission and your vision and sort of not too much content that they can't find what they're looking for. And lastly, make sure that all of the sort of functionality on your website is user-friendly. There are tools out there that if you are concerned that people can't find information on your website, you can actually rent a person who will tell you what is wrong with the usability on your website. So it sounds kind of weird, but if you type in usability testing in Google, you will find different places where you can pay somebody like $40 where they'll run through your website and you can ask them, I want you to do these 5 tasks, and they'll tell you what problems they had along the way and what they encountered. This is a really great way to figure out if there's something wrong with your website and that you can't get people to the place that you want them to. And lastly, you need to segment and nurture your donor list. I can't stress this enough. Your donors are different. All of them have new experiences with you, or they've been with you for 10 years, or they are local to your location. make sure that you're segmenting them and using that information. There are tools out there, CRM tools, that enable you to sort of keep track of who they are, where they live, how long you've been in contact with them. I know that a lot of these tools are expensive, but if anybody wants recommendations, I'm happy to email you some recommendations later on or chat with you about some of the options out there. But there are definite ways to make sure that you know who your donors are, who is the last person that reached out to them, and how you want to reach out to them in the future. So I just crammed a ton of information into 10 minutes and talked really fast. I apologize for that, but everybody else is going to give you a little bit more finite information about different ways to fundraise.
I have a feeling we'll be coming back to social media throughout this discussion. Stephanie, let's move on to you from Kickstarter and move down the specificity ladder here.
Awesome. Hey, so I hope you guys know what Kickstarter is, just in case. It is a platform for funding creative projects. Anyone can use our website, a nonprofit or an individual, and as long as it is a creative project, you can do it on Kickstarter. We are really loose in how we define creative, in that we have 13 categories on our site. If your project fits in one of them, you're good to go. Obviously, you guys are straight on that. So an important thing about Kickstarter projects is not a straight donation platform. The idea is that you are offering people rewards in exchange for their pledges to your project. So someone might pledge $10 to your project and get a digital download of a CD. They may pledge $25 and get invited to, I don't know, some sort of special event or the making of it or the physical copy of the CD itself. So you're offering both experiences as well as things. So that short video I had in the lower left-hand corner there, that was from a project that I had pledged $1 to, just because I wanted to follow and see what would happen. And as the project ran, I got this great video of Imogen Heap as she scored the composition track for a film. So the key idea here is that Kickstarter is about many people pledging modest amounts of money. Most frequently, it's about $25. In exchange for these exclusive experiences, things they can't get anywhere else, or maybe not as special except for here, and then to collectively realize this new work. They want to be a part of this experience. So that Imogen Heap example I just highlighted for you was an exclusive experience I got, and I felt like I'm a part of the making of this film that she is helping to score. So we've been around for just over 4 years, and we've seen some pretty impressive numbers. I like to share these because I'm not sure if everyone knows how big this thing is. So I updated this last night, so this is nearly up to date. But over 4.2 million people have pledged over $670 million to over 100,000 projects on the site. There have been 43,000 that have been successfully funded. To give you a sense of how that plays out in the classical music category, it's a subcategory of music. Music is one of the biggest categories on the site. Classical music has seen over 52,000 pledges. That means not 52,000 people, but people maybe more than once have pledged to classical music projects on Kickstarter. There's been nearly $4 million pledged, and over 1,000 projects launched. It has a pretty high success rate, a little over, it looks like 64% of classical music projects do reach their funding goal. That's actually an important thing I forgot to say. So Kickstarter has an all or nothing funding model. So when you come to the site, you say, hey, I want to make a new CD, for example, and you want to raise X amount of dollars to do it. If you don't reach that goal, no one is ever charged. Everyone walks away. It's like nothing ever happened. We want to make sure that people are achieving the amount of money they need to raise in order to realize the project. So classical music does see a little bit more money pledged on average to projects. I think this is because of tickets and other kinds of exclusive experiences that orchestras and individual musicians are offering. So it's about $74. People are raising just about $4,400, which is actually really typical on site. People are raising about $5,000 on average. People usually are overfunded on Kickstarter, so if they do set a goal of $4,400, they're raising, in this case, $5,300. So this is really typical, and it's really largely driven by that rewards model, the fact that someone is getting something in exchange for their support, direct access to the music that you're creating, or the musician that's creating it, or the orchestra that's sponsoring it. So that is a powerful driver of pledges. So I just want to run through a bunch of projects that I think would be very relevant to you before we move on to the next presenter. So there's lots of different ways people have used Kickstarter to fund music projects. This is an example of a sextet. They sort of ride this world between pop music and classical music, and in sort of a very fortunate way, they've had many really interesting musicians work with them, compose music for them to include them in live shows and on their records. They wanted to take that collection of music and do an album that was just of their music, of the music they had performed for other people. So they set this modest goal of $5,000 to do a run of CDs. They were delightfully surprised that when they launched the project that people were very excited about the promise, and they ended up raising over $10,000, so double their goal. This is an example, I love this story. This is two women who are doing a master's at Juilliard. They looked out on the classical music scene and they were terrified. They felt like the market is shrinking, the interest is shrinking, and they looked back to their own childhood and how they developed a love of music, and they realized it was through music videos. So the proposal was to make a music video of a favorite piece of theirs that they would perform a violin and a cello. This is another great story, a solo pianist. Actually, this story got a lot of buzz on the internet. If you Google it, you'll see a lot of people talking about it, both positively and negatively. But I think it's an incredible story. Basically, this is a pianist who'd been transcribing pieces for the piano, for solo piano pieces, and it was all handwritten. It was all his own thing for himself. Someone asked if they could, make a typeset copy of it, something that they could use and then reproduce and share, and he thought it would be fine. It worked out. He was really impressed with the level of the work, and he thought, this is a way to get this music, this creative work I've been making out into the world. So he had a really simple proposal. It says, I can't actually see that far. Virtuoso solo piano arrangements, professionally notated, can soon be yours for 50 cents a page. So he framed it in this kind of salesman-y way, but basically saying, I'm trying to get this material out in the world, and if you buy pledging in exchange, I'll give you the music. This is a great example I was actually just describing to Diane earlier. This is a woman, I'm sure many of you in this room know her. She had this beautiful piece she was working on, was approached to record it with an orchestra. You guys know how expensive that can be. And part of the deal is that she would have to help raise the money on her own, and I think she was trying to raise about $18,000. And if you go and look at this project, and I highly encourage you to, it's an incredible example of a project on our site. She was basically saying, help me make this record and I'll give you a copy of it when it's done. It was a really direct exchange. I think it was $10 to download it and like $15 to get a physical copy of the CD. She was working, one of the reasons she was able to do this is they also worked with a label that is very artist-centric and was very okay with this idea of her distributing her music online. Orchestras have also worked in collaborations with documentary filmmakers to make films about their, in this case, exceptional outreach programs. This is, again, a Juilliard example. This is as I said, it is a film to show off some Juilliard education projects. This is another example of a much lower goal this time. And this is, for an individual artist, this is something I always say, like, this is a way to test an idea, see what your market is like, get an idea off the ground. You don't need to raise the $18,000, right? If you don't know how big your audience is, maybe you just are launching something into the world, want to see how it will go. So this is a woman who, there was a new record label, established record label in Canada, wanted to launch a new series starting with this piece, and so they asked her if she would help with some of the fundraising for US and Canadian distribution. There are plenty of very well-known people who have come to the site over and over again. One of the biggest questions I get is can I use Kickstarter more than once? And the answer is absolutely yes. If you continue to make interesting and compelling work, if you continue to offer music and exclusive experiences in exchange for people's support, if you continue, as Diane just talked about, to stay in contact with these people as they support you, to bring them into your experience, offer them these enriching moments and connect with them. This is one of the powers of Kickstarter. They will continue to support you. So Paola Pristini is an example of someone who's run 3 successful projects on the site. This is her most recent one. You can see this is the most money she's actually ever raised on Kickstarter, which was her 3rd project. So going to that sort of success example. And it was very ambitious. She's saying, sort of based on the success of my past work, we're really trying to push this to the next level and create a really great video of this piece that we're working on, as well as launch a new label and a new way for musicians to release work. And then finally, some of you may be aware of another sort of, I think, contentious project, but wildly successful. And I think this is just an example. This is actually the highest funded classical music project on Kickstarter. I think an example of how people with really ambitious ideas, really big following, and really big vision, and also really established, can do really incredible things on the site. So that's it.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Randy, let's move to you and State Arts Council.
Okay. I want to start off with 2 comments. First, I was told that everyone on the panel was doing a PowerPoint presentation, so that I was under an enormous amount of peer pressure to throw something together. So forgive me for what you are about to receive. Second, it's important for you to know that I woke up Saturday morning with no voice whatsoever, so if I break down into peals of coughing, you'll have to forgive me. I do have my water, I do have my microphone. I will do the best I can. And Stephanie has agreed to be my mouse today. So thank you, Stephanie. Why don't we click? I thought we'd start off, and I know none of you can read this out there. I thought we would, but I was required to put it in by the research staff at the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies who provided me with this research. I thought it would be a good idea to just get a context of how orchestras are doing with State Arts Council funding across the country as a conglomerate, and how it's changed over the past several years. So the NASA folks were nice enough to chart it back to 1986. And it turns out that in 1986, the funding level was about the same as it is today. In the middle, however, there was an enormous increase in support as State Arts Agency funding levels would go up and up and up. And as those of you who are out in the field know, State Arts Agency funding levels over the past maybe 10 years have gone down and down and down. Hopefully that is turning around. But in 2012, there were 772 grants given to orchestras. 4% of all State Arts Agency funding went to orchestras, and 7% of all the dollars that State Arts Agencies awarded went to orchestras from State Arts Agencies. Now, it's interesting to note that while that is very similar to 1986, if you adjust for inflation, which I hate to do, but if you adjust for inflation, we found that $14.2 million in grants reported in 2012 are worth about $6.8 million in 1986 dollars. So there's still the same amount of money that's going to orchestras, but it buys an awful lot less. It's also important to note that a lot of that money from State Arts Agencies is going primarily for operating support. So if you look at the chart, which of course you can't see, $4.7 million went for projects in 2012, $9.4 million went for operating support. And in fact, most of the operating support that you probably receive, just general operating support, probably comes from your State Arts Council. It comes from very few other sources because most of the other funders around are not giving you grants for operations. They're giving you grants for specific projects. So if you came today seeking wisdom about how to get more operating support for your orchestra, today's probably not the session for you, because I'm going to focus on how you can look toward the public sector in particular to maybe generate some more project support revenue for your organization. If I go click, you can see, by the way, how those project grants to orchestras sort of played out in 2012. Most of it actually went for performances. Some of it went for arts instruction. About 38 of the grants went for that. Artistic support, whatever the heck that is. Seminars and conferences were supported, school residencies, and other activities. Other activities being what State Arts Agency staff like to file things under when they can't figure out where to file them. Okay, click. So, time to think creatively about new funding sources for the arts. There are interesting things being funded throughout the country, and you sort of have to think beyond the traditional and look at using this art form that we participate in as a way to engage audiences and communities on a different level. Click. Education is one way, and this is a frustrating area because if your state is anything like my state, There's an inordinate focus on teaching to the test and trying to respond to the kinds of standards-based learning that is focused on getting good test results that satisfy politicians and parents. And there's very little time in the curriculum for music and art and the important things in life. We have found that there is a great deal of success in trying to address those things that schools are trying to improve performance in. So literacy being a big part of that. And so we have seen some success in getting small amounts of money from education, from the education department in your state and other educationally oriented foundations in trying to use the arts to address literacy issues. Click. Environment. Environment is fun. In Lexington, Kentucky, for example, there is a program called Eco Arts. These grants fund creative projects that get people thinking about stormwater, energy conservation, recycling, and other environmental issues. The Kentucky River Keepers got a $5,000 grant for hands-on workshops for intermediate and middle school students, including artist talks, storytelling, and musical performances, all on the subject of water quality. So there are ways that small ensembles can go into the schools, program and promote discussions on this particular issue. We actually got a grant in Rhode Island from the Environmental Protection Agency through our State Department of Environmental Management to send artists and residents into classrooms to teach about stormwater and watershed issues. And these are artists of all sorts of disciplines. So we have musical groups go in and engage the students on music that is related to water themes, all sorts of things just to promote conversation and discussion. The Hartford Symphony's artistic director, Carolyn Kwan, talks about the work that she does in conservation and environment through her performances around the globe as part of the multimedia project, A Life, A Journey Through Time, which includes photographs from environmentalists, National Geographic, and the like. And these are things that you could work into your program and maybe do certain kinds of artist talks or talks with environmentalists in the community to highlight the kinds of things that you have shown as part of this performance activity. Click. Economic development is huge in a lot of states, and this is really oriented around jobs. I have seen the most compelling arguments made by the folks at the Rhode Island Philharmonic, for example, who say that they actually pay more in taxes for employee benefits than they actually get from the State Arts Council in their grant, which is sort of, it actually is designed to convince legislators to give me more money so I can change that balance. But if you can prove that you are, through your work, creating jobs and increasing the economy in some way, there are really valuable ways that you can make that pay for you in the long run. Massachusetts, for example, has a separate grant program called the Adams Art Fund, which is designed to support economic development projects community by community, and orchestras can compete very well in that realm. In many respects, orchestras are the largest and most significant arts entities from an employment and other perspectives in a community. So there are ways that you can partner with your local economic development people, not just on the tourism aspect, which you should be doing already, but also in the aspect of what your work translates into as far as the economy and jobs. And these are things that you should be documenting as well. Click. Justice and corrections. There is, now, my state being, I hope, an exception, where every time I go to the director of corrections in the state government, he said the problem that they have is that they don't want people to perceive that prisoners are having fun. So they don't want to put any money into programs like this. But there is money that's available both at the state and at the federal level. For example, there is a women's correctional string orchestra called the Hilliard Mountain Women's Correctional String Orchestra in Alaska, an orchestra comprised of inmate musicians playing stringed instruments at a junior and high school level, showcasing the rehabilitative and redemptive power of music. in the lives of women struggling to find their way back into society. This is something that's funded through the corrections system, and this is something that you at the orchestra level can maybe engage with your local correctional people in. The Vermont Community Foundation funded a tour of state prisons by a local orchestra. The Atlanta Music Project, the City of Atlanta-backed nonprofit, aims to transform the lives of the city's most at-risk and economically disadvantaged youth through low-cost, hands-on after-school music instruction 5 days a week. Yay! I see somebody going like that. Okay. These are ways that you can really have a meaningful presence in your community, not that you don't already have a meaningful presence in your community, but maybe get some resources to do the kinds of music instruction and work that engages you with at-risk populations. I know that the arts organization in Rhode Island named ASU20 is currently getting about $200,000 from the Department of Children, Youth, and Families for their after-school program that is sort of a halfway house between juvenile detention and infusion back into society. So these are things that you can be exploring. Click. Community development and housing. The Rhode Island Philharmonic has a program called PUMP, which is the Pawtucket Urban Music Project, in partnership with the Jacqueline M. Walsh School for the Performing Arts in Pawtucket. This is a program for at-risk youth that was established back in 2001 with money from the Pawtucket Housing Authority, which got its money through the Housing and Urban Development Department at the federal level, which provides private voice and private instrumental instruction and sectional rehearsals for people who live in housing projects in the city of Pawtucket. There are a number of these kinds of things in your communities. These are things that your orchestra can play a role in trying to connect to your community in a different way. Click. How am I doing on time?
You're fine.
Great. Hartford Symphony Orchestra, Musicians Care Project, is a community engagement program that will enhance the quality of life for people of all ages whose healthcare needs prevent them from taking part in traditional music performances by providing live, interactive musical experience. If they cannot come to you, you can go to them. And there is funding available for these kinds of programs that engage in senior populations, that engage in communities that are not able, for one reason or another, to come to your performances. And you will find that your musicians sometimes find this a very fulfilling activity to engage in as well. The Knoxville Symphony's Music and Wellness Program is to provide live musical performances that enhance the healing process and benefit patients, visitors, and staff in healthcare settings. This is funded locally in partnership with the University of Tennessee's Medical Center Cancer Institute, which explores ways that music can benefit populations in healthcare settings. And here in St. Louis, the St. Louis Symphony's Symphony Cares program provides free music programs for adults and children in area hospitals, assisted living centers, and nursing homes. This approach enables the symphony to take music to people who aren't able to make it to Powell Hall and provides symphony musicians with the gift of making a real and lasting difference in the lives of these patients. Click. Social services. There are tons of programs serving kids and young adults with autism. Annapolis Symphony Orchestra partners with Nordstrom's department store to kick off Autism Awareness Month through programs and activities. New Jersey Symphony Orchestra is one of 22 orchestras to receive a first-year Getty Education and Community Investment Grant from the League to further develop their autism community initiative. And click. Parks and Rec, we all know about concerts in the park. Sometimes they're hard to get funded, but sometimes when they actually get started up, they are institutionalized and they are part of what you do every year to great community benefit. The Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles, YOLA Summer Camp program, has grown to include 3 orchestras, a preschool program, mentorships, group lessons, chamber music, and parent ensembles. Parent ensembles, I love that. Program serves hundreds of students who attend 4 days a week. Again, these kinds of park and rec programs can be rewarding not just to the communities that you serve in, but also to the kids who participate in them. Click. How to access this money. If the programs exist where you live, that's terrific. Take advantage of them. If they don't, then your opportunity to connect with the people you need to connect with to build these programs is profound. And it's not just government agencies. I have actually found that if you approach a foundation who would not fund you in a million years because music is not one of their areas of concern, but juvenile justice might be, that you can engage them to support a pilot program. That pilot program can get established and become the kind of thing that people see results from. And then you find a way for the government agencies to feel that this is a low cost, because to them it would be low cost, to you it would be not, a low cost way to help to serve the populations that they need to serve. You solve a problem for them. And usually it's it's a private donor, it's a private foundation who gets you in the door, gets it started. And if you engage your local government professionals in these particular areas, you will find that they can be your biggest champions. In fact, one of the projects that we did with the Department of Health and the Department of Environmental Management started because a Department of Health person was passionate about a particular area and got us involved in it, and it grew to be quite an extraordinary program. Click. So, first thing is to be a solution to their problem, as I mentioned. You need to basically find ways that the work that you can do in the community, with some of these models as your inspiration, can help to address issues of concern to the Department of Health, corrections, environmental management, any number of things. And you've got a great groundwork to build from in the stuff that is happening throughout the country in orchestras and arts organizations. Click. Start small and prove yourself. Again, you can't build an enormous program overnight, and the way that you can prove the benefit of this is to start with something and assess the results and prove to people that it has a chance to cost effectively address a problem that they're concerned with. And finally, click. Document. The most important part of all is for you to document everything that you do, to assess your success based on the values and criteria that your professionals in the government field and otherwise feel are important ways to say, yes, this is a successful program. And they will tell you how they will judge whether what is happening is a success or not. So follow their lead, document everything, and you can then build yourself into what I would refer to as the indispensable program, which continues to get funded. Click. That's it.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Randy. That was a lot of information, and I'm glad your voice held up. Let's move quickly to Emma.
Yes, well, that's a hard act to follow, and how wonderful that Randy is out there, having left our field, but obviously still so supportive on so many different levels and bringing us some great comments. I was asked by the League to get very practical for orchestras in budget sizes 3 to 8. I apologize in advance if this information is not so useful to those of you from larger organizations. I think what we heard from Randy and others is that we all have to think about what is the message that we're sending about our orchestra's civic contribution. How are we packaging up and talking about how our orchestras contribute to our local communities? And this fact came out when my staff and we started to search for local level funders in the corporate sector particularly, who would fund the arts as opposed to education, children in need, any other cause that you might think of. And we found 76 regional corporate chains and funders who would fund education and kids, but very many fewer who would fund the arts per se as a category, and this is, as we know, a declining trend. So when you think about packaging up how you talk about what your orchestra does, the first piece of advice at the local level is you have to massage your message to talk about what you're doing for the community, what you are doing outside the concert hall, what are you doing in education for the children, for the next generation. This will automatically put you in better contention with all of those funders who are sort of sitting on the borderline, able to be persuaded, but otherwise you wouldn't qualify. So the first piece of advice, if you have not already enrolled your nonprofit in the combined federal campaign, you should do that. Is anyone here already enrolled in the combined federal campaign? Couple. Okay, what is this? This is the world's largest and most successful annual workplace charity campaign. It is run by the federal government of the United States and raises millions of dollars each year. Pledges made by federal civilian, postal, and military donors during the campaign season, which runs September 1st to December 15th, support eligible nonprofit organizations across the United States. It is free for you to register your charity, your organization, and the information about your orchestra is disseminated through 200 sub-programs across the US of the combined federal campaign. And basically, the federal workers, they say, okay, put a percentage of my payroll to charity, and here's who I'd like to pick. And so once you are registered, it's an annual renewal, it's free, you just have to remember to do it. There's this intensive period that for many of us fits right before the calendar year end, so it runs in conjunction with annual year-end giving appeals. It's very easy to organize yourselves into the CFC, and that would be our first advice. Then we would recommend focusing on your local professional services outlets with a sort of civic and community contribution argument. So what do I mean by professional services? Firstly, banking chains, regional and state-based banking chains, which are looking for two things. They're looking for public profile as well as access to potential clientele and customers. They're looking for goodwill and a far-reaching message about their own social contribution. I'll say a little more about that shortly. Private wealth management firms in your state or local geographic region, and particularly investment franchises. So T. Rowe Price, JP Morgan Private Client Bank, there are many of these basically regional franchises of national brands, and all of the people that run those regional franchises as independent small businesses are again looking for community traction, looking for potential clients. Have a look for those private wealth management firms. Insurance agencies, especially life insurance agencies in your region, for similar reasons, law firms, accounting firms. Then I would say look to the national chains that have discretionary store-based giving budgets. You're probably all aware that national grocery chains in particular give their store managers discretionary funding. Usually the upper grant limit is maybe $2,500 per grant, but if you can lobby the one person that runs your local Kroger's and get that person excited about what you're doing, you know, the money is yours. It's a very easy channel if you just figure it out. Retail chains, restaurant chains, and department store chains, similarly in your local region. You may find upon investigation that the local store managers in any of those categories have discretionary giving budgets, either for merchandise or for cash. So it's important to be looking in kind as well as cash. It applies to everything I'm about to say. I would review the community giving program of your major sporting teams and franchises in the geographic region. Again, frequently focused on kids and sport, but also sometimes on the arts, and youth orchestras can skirt the line between building the life skills and teamwork of young children and the next generation in the same way that kids baseball does. So we've had some success with community giving program of major sporting franchises. Don't forget your regional and statewide media conglomerates or chains. Again, these are people, and even though the media is a declining category, the Gannett newspaper chain is one example across the United States that gives significant money to local community organizations and the arts in each of the cities where Gannett papers are distributed in kind, and also advertising, in-kind advertising from your local media conglomerates. Seek out audience members, volunteers, and trustees who work for major national corporations that maintain generous matching gift programs And my favorite example, which applies to most of America, is Macy's. Macy's is quite generous, gives over $4 million a year in matching gifts to any associate of any Macy's store who asks for their gift to be matched. So if you have, ushers in the theater, if you have people in the audience whose kids on summer break or Christmas time are working in a Macy's, make that public, because if those people put in their matching gift request, the money comes to you. And Macy's also has My Macy's District Grants, which are designed to support local programs in the communities served across the country. And that, again, is a fairly simple application and competition process. I should have prefaced my comments by saying everything is a competition. So how you, whether we like it or not, so how you talk about what your orchestra is doing and the terms in which you couch its mission, its service to the local community. Think about how your competitors are also expressing the value proposition of their organizations, and just be clever and thoughtful about how you speak. And finally, I would say, try a $5 temporary tattoo. This on my hand is the League of American Orchestras fundraiser here at conference. It is yours for a $5 donation at the League Hospitality Desk. And you could do this at your own orchestra too. For those of you who can't read it, it says, I Heart Orchestras. And for $50, you can get a T-shirt. But, sometimes the gimmicks catch people's attention in the local community. They're fun. It's when you shake hands, etc. And my colleagues have been responsible for that shtick this year. It's a temporary tattoo. It can be removed, although I tried this morning unsuccessfully to get it out. I'm glad I didn't put it on my forehead. So if you'll forgive me, let me just run through specifically by region across the United States. If you're in the Midwest, you should look to Super Value Inc., the major grocery chain located in Minnesota, which has the Arthur T. Erickson Foundation as a subsidiary that funds primarily in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Giant Eagle Inc. out of Pittsburgh, PA, and the Giant Eagle Foundation, primarily Ohio, Cleveland, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh area, Walmart stores, Sam's Club giving program, of course, nationally, Dollar Bank chain out of Cleveland, Ohio, and Pittsburgh, EMC Insurance Foundation, Indiana. In the capital DC region, if you're down there, the Albertsons grocery chain has the DART Group Foundation, Geographic Focus California, District of Columbia, Maryland, and DART Group 2, which is ADS Virginia. The SunTrust Life Insurance Foundation is Washington, D.C., Florida, Georgia, Maryland, North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Virginia. If you're over on the West Coast, the Albertsons chain again in California, the Save Mart Supermarkets Corporate Giving Program out of Modesto gives 3% of every purchase to charity nominated by the customer. Dine Equity Inc., which is the conglomerate that runs IHOP nationally and the Applebee's national chain, is Kansas, California, and nationally giving. New England, Hannaford Brothers Company out of Maine. It's Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, Vermont. Eastern region, Price Choppers Golub Foundation out of upstate New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, New York, Pennsylvania, Vermont. The Kroger chain nationally. And then national funders, corporations who are supporting Staples Foundation, of course, Staples office supplies in kind and some cash, gift cards. Whole Foods supermarkets, if they do several times a year, they have community giving days, otherwise known as 5% days, where 5% of your local Whole Foods supermarket sales go to charity. And to get involved, you basically lobby the local store manager, as I've described. Costco will give warehouse donations to a limited extent, and Men's Warehouse is involved also. So with that, I'll hand back, and I hope that was practical and useful.
Great. I would actually add to that, because I've had some experience with them in really small areas, as Casey's. If you live in the Midwest, there's a Casey's in almost every small town, and they give regular support primarily to fundraising activities of organizations, not to operating support or projects, but they help with gift cards and food and, all kinds of things that can be useful.
And actually, I'm astonished at how few arts organizations are signed up with their local United Way. It's absolutely mind-blowing when I get the long list of organizations that I can contribute to, how few arts organizations are on that list.
Great. I'm going to very shortly open this up to questions because I think there may be a lot of them and our time is short. But I did want to ask one question. As I was listening to Randy describe the unusual places one might go in the public sector for funding for your projects, I wondered if there was overlap between the kinds of things he was describing and the kinds of things, Stephanie, you see popping up on Kickstarter. And I wondered if you might talk about that a little bit. And then if you could also maybe talk to people about what it's like to sign up a project for Kickstarter. What's that process like? What do they need to be prepared to provide you with? And what's the range of things that they need to be prepared to provide to donors?
Yeah, sure. So that's a great question. So I highlighted just sort of musical output projects today, but there is a very diverse cross-section of projects happening all across the site. For sure, we even have a tag on the site called Civic, and we created that tag as sort of in honor of all the incredible civic-minded projects happening, and they're coming from music and art and design and from all the categories. And I think that anything that has a community engagement focus, anything that is directly engaging your community and saying you can be a part of this incredible thing we're trying to build, whether it is a concert in the park or whether it is an outreach program or something like that, it's happening on Kickstarter. I will say, because we discourage people, we say no cause funding on Kickstarter. It does have to, the premise is that you're doing a creative project. So people will do projects with youth orchestras, for instance. We want to record our youth orchestra, and I think it's great. They'll focus on celebrating the music coming out of the youth orchestra, of coming to the concert and seeing the kids perform, of the artist, whether it's a musician or a composer who's working with that youth. As far as signing up a project, it's very straightforward. I would say one of the sort of points of pride we have is on our user interface. As Diane talked about usability being really important. It's very important to us. You go to the site, you click the start button, you acknowledge and accept the guidelines, and then you're into the project build process. You can do that today. You could poke around. You can do things, create drafts. I have about 5 drafts going right now. You could never launch, you can launch, but basically we give you a space to upload a video, we give you a project description space, which is like any sort of media-rich thing that you're used to seeing where you can add video or music or links or pictures, whatever you desire. Kickstarter is a very visual platform, so we do encourage that kind of content. And then you create your rewards, and we give you a sort of a specific box for those tiers. On the back end, there's a lot of support for managing all the people that pledge to your projects, but that sort of comes later. So once you've created your project, you submit it for review, and because we do have these guidelines about it being a creative project and nothing else, that's basically what we're looking for. So everyone in this room, you guys would be fine, unless you did try to pitch like a cause project. We would say, can you focus more on the creative aspect of this? We'd say it takes about 2 days for us to review your project, and once we do, you can launch at any time. So you could launch, that minute because you're so excited, or you can wait till a strategic moment, which we recommend.
Okay. Yeah. Great. I'm going to encourage you, if you have questions, to line up at the mics and just take turns so that we can record all of your questions. And while you're doing that, I will ask Randy to talk a little bit. Surprise! I know that sometimes you hear comments in the field about sort of mission drift when you begin to explore alternative areas of funding, like many of which Randy described. And, in some ways that's a very good thing because it's enriching the sort of panoply of things that we do for the community. And I'm wondering if how you feel about sort of maintaining the integrity of music making in the context of searching for money from, say, the Department of Energy for a project. What kinds of I don't see any conflict at all, but I wonder how you sort of manage that and encourage people who might be on the outside to feel like they're being stretched and pulled in different directions than they were either trained to do or wanted to do, and what's involved in sort of bringing all those pieces together in a rich and powerful way.
Yeah, I think this is a very serious question and issue. I think that if your mission is to both present performances by your orchestra and interest and engage the community in that work, that you can find ways to connect both. You can find ways to certainly underscore performances of classical repertoire but also perhaps through clever programming, find ways to engage other communities in your residential area. I was going to use the word communities again, and that was probably wrong. So that if you want to do a series of pieces that may have implications that came out of the Holocaust, for example, then you connect with your local Holocaust museum and find ways to have conversations about that subject area in the context of the work that you're trying to do. If you're engaging on an educational level, then education needs to be part of what you concern yourself with as an orchestra in developing the next generation of audiences. They're every way that you can connect it, and as long as there's some connect, I think you can convince others that that's an appropriate way for you to be going.
Great, let's take questions from the floor. And please say your name and where you're from, and direct your question at all of the panelists or one of them as you wish.
My name is Albert Oppenheimer, and I have the good fortune to be part of the family of the People's Music School in Chicago, and I direct their El Sistema-inspired system of youth orchestras. Randy, you actually used a picture from the Yours project in Chicago.
I steal.
It was one of my kids. I saw him out there. So my question deals with mostly what Randy talked about, but any of the panelists who have thoughts or opinions about this, feel free to chime in. In regards to documenting impact in areas other than artistic impact. So if we're looking at all these other types of public sector funding sources, how can we actually measure how we affect juvenile justice? How can we actually measure how we affect housing and urban development? That sort of thing. And what information already exists in regards to these impacts? Can we jump on some other study that's already out there?
Well, just to quickly jump in, I think that the fields that you're interested in addressing have their own metrics, and that you can pick up on them and build from them. For example, in juvenile justice, there's a recidivism rate that is standard, but there are some arts-related programs that can speak to a reduced level of return offender kind of thing. You just have to look at each of the fields that you're trying to work in and find out how do they describe success, and develop your baseline information, and then prove after a year or two or whatever the period of time is that you have improved upon those baselines.
I would just like to add to that, our Director of Research at Fractured Atlas, Ian David Moss, created a webinar on data collection, and it's all about collecting data for funders, and it teaches you how to do it. So if anybody wants a copy of that, I'm happy to email it to you. I have business cards up here if anybody.
He's a former Rhode Islander, and he's brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, I'm Paul Schwendener from New York, and I have a question for Stephanie. If you could elaborate a bit more about what Kickstarter means for registered nonprofits, 501c3s, and private individuals. You mentioned about how rewards are important in fundraising, and for example, what are the differences if a nonprofit wants to raise money, but they're not, they're going to offer a person a letter of acknowledgement that they can use for tax purposes. If you could just explain a little
Sure.
bit the differences.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I actually should have put that in my presentation. So a nonprofit using Kickstarter goes through all the same motions on the back end as they would typically through an individual giving campaign. So when you create a project on Kickstarter, you set up your nonprofit bank account with Amazon so that when you collect the funds are going through a registered nonprofit, and you can offer a tax deduction in exchange for people's support sport. Because you are offering rewards in exchange, obviously there's going to be sort of a partial deductibility thing happening there, but also I always recommend that you really reserve the offering those letters for the higher levels, because at the lower levels, most people like me, are pledging on Kickstarter not for a tax deduction. I'm pledging because I want your music. I want to go see the show. I want to see a rehearsal or a performance of some sort. So we are actually working on a page on our website to help people parse all this out, but basically the short answer is nonprofits can use Kickstarter. You can offer people a tax deduction and just follow the same rules you always follow with individual giving. You're welcome.
Next.
Hi, my name is Jackie Slogenhop, and I'm with the Symphony Guild of Charlotte and on the Charlotte Symphony Board. And my question is for Emma, and it's a very practical question because you went through a lot of great resources by region and had all the different policies for giving that are varied and wonderful that are out there, but it's a lot to keep track as I'm trying to furiously write these things down. Are you aware of any online resources that not-for-profits can go to that lays out those policies or in-kind donations and also for monetary donations?
I guess I would throw that back to the group. I'll tell you how we put this together is we went to the foundation directory online that if you don't know about it, you need to. And we started there, and then we researched each one to come up with a list that I spat out. But I did talk to the staff here. I'm happy to supply it to the league, and then you can get it from them if it's helpful. I wish there was a shortcut, but we did not find one.
It sounds like someone needs to develop a shortcut.
Right.
So.
Maybe I'll do that.
Did you?
Actually, I should say that the Bank of America, for example, supports our Big Yellow School Bus program, which provides grants for us to help schools rent buses to take kids to student performances and the like. And most of the students that attended the Rhode Island Philharmonic's student performances this past year, thousands of them, came courtesy of the Big Yellow School Bus program. So that's yet another way that you can check for resources in your community.
Yes, we have another question from the floor.
Hi, Larry Isaacson. I'm from Boston. We're a level 8 orchestra, and we're trying to figure out how to find granting sources. Associated grant makers, maybe Emma, you can help us with that, or Randy. Is in Boston, I believe. They may be national. I know they're in Boston. We can sign up and go. For $80, you can go there. For $200 and something, you can do it online. We have gotten a couple of small grants, a $2,500 capital grant, a couple of local cultural councils. We're sort of looking for the next level, like where do we look? Other than just going into other people's programs and seeing where they've gotten money from, which we've done, and we've had a little luck with that. But is there a resource for looking for grants that we're missing for a low-budget orchestra with not a lot of money to do lots of research?
Yeah, I would say for those of you in large cities where and Boston is one such city, where the Foundation Center is active. So the Foundation Center is a national resource. You have to pay if you want to access it in your own home or office. But if you go to the Foundation Center, to the library, you can use the full research facilities online for free. So in New York, when we're dealing with organizations at your budget level, Larry, we usually say, go to the Foundation Center, take a sandwich, sit there all day, and do all the research in one hit. Because you can sit there and you can search every funder, every size organization. And you know, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, also with whom you're familiar, very active and full of free resources, can probably point you in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's a good, sorry, go ahead.
I would just add also that the Foundation Center has about 650 cooperating collections throughout the United States. So if you're not in one of those major metropolitan areas where they're located, if you go on their website, you can find either a library or a school or someplace in your area where you can still access it for free by going to that location. And usually their staff is trained and can guide you through the best way to search.
Yeah, and I was going to suggest pretty much the same thing, that you look for that resource, and when you're considering the cost, it's often cheaper to get yourself to the area where the resource actually exists and use it physically, even if it means buying a plane ticket to New York, than sometimes it is to subscribe, and have it in your office. It takes a lot more time, but, we all know at orchestra levels 3 to 8, sometimes time is something that you have more of than money, unfortunately.
It's at the Boston Public Library.
Go to the Boston Public Library if you're in Boston, right. Okay, next.
Joel Horwich, Charlotte, North Carolina, not associated with any professional arts organization there, though. Hypothetical, 501c3 with which I'm theoretically associated would love to advertise the products and services of its supporting donor organizations and would, but for one small problem, 501c3. As you may know, under 501c3, you can announce these products and services provided no price, value, endorsement, or inducement to buy is provided. So you consider perhaps an audiovisual display in the concert hall for your major donors. How close can you get to close without breaking the rules? Any idea?
Well, not being a lawyer, I don't know. I've always thought that program ads are a good exchange for contributions, and they help to promote the products and activities. I don't know if you can set up a table in the lobby, if that would be crossing a boundary or something along those lines. From a legal perspective, I just don't have an answer on that one. Does anyone?
Yeah, I don't either. I think you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis, and I think, a good test is it a sort of visual representation that acknowledges a sponsorship, for example, or is it actually a product offering that would be transactional between the sponsor and the donor? But that's kind of gray area, and I think you need to talk to your lawyers on the board about that.
Thank you.
I actually would also add that typically the definition between sponsorship and if they're doing advertising is who's controlling the content. If the 501c3 is controlling the content, then it's sponsorship. If you are controlling the content as the corporation, then it is advertising. So that may be a way to get around it.
But I've gone to many symphony performances where this evening is sponsored by the local ABC affiliate, and a pre-concert, a curtain speech is given, and the president of the local ABC affiliate comes out and welcomes everyone to the hall, and that's pretty much it. It's almost like a public broadcasting kind of snippet.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time. I thank the panel immensely for a rich and juicy list of possibilities for us, and I hope it provided you all with meaningful information to take back home with you. Thank you for joining us, and have a great conference.
Okay.